don't know me, my name is Heidi Roy. I'm the Director of Stewardship here at the Society. I've been here since January. So I work closely with Mark. So first of all, thank you so much for taking time out of your day today to join us for the CEO update webinar, to give Mark some time to tell you what we're doing, what we've been doing, and how we're moving forward. Before I turn over to Mark, just a few housekeeping notes. The bottom of your screen, if you move your cursor down, you'll see there is a Q&A. And in that box, please write any questions that you have. June Kinoshita is going to be on with us. She's on, and she'll be answering your questions. There'll also be time for Mark to answer your questions. The next box over is chat. In that chat, you're welcome to say hi to your friends, have side conversations, but any questions that you post in there will not be answered because June's going to be monitoring the question and answer box. This webinar is going to be recorded and it'll be posted early next week on our website and our YouTube channel. So Mark, it's all you.
Thanks, Heidi, and thanks, June, for, it's always great to have June on because she can answer questions I never could even think of, let alone answer. So it's great to have a good team. It's great to have a good team at the FSHD Society. I have the privilege of serving alongside and working with, and I'd start tearing up if I went any further. But they're special, as are you, all of our families who have tuned in. I miss you. Can I just say that? I mean, this doesn't have to be ultra formal because we are family, and I have missed you. I missed being with you. Many of us have connected via Zoom. Heidi has worked that out, and I've Zoomed with families and small groups and some extended families that have extended from California to the East Coast. And I just left one family on and said, listen, I'll get out of your way. You have a little virtual family reunion. This is great. But those have been highlights. But as an old AT&T commercial used to say, it's the next best thing to being there, but it's not like being there. So I'm anxious to move on from this, as I'm sure you are. I have a few slides that I want to show. Some of it is sharing background information that some of you might know, and others might not. I know that we have a few new people to us here, just new in the past year or so. And so if it's redundant for you, they do say repetition is the best teacher, and that's okay. But otherwise, I'm going to go through those very, very quickly. And there might be several areas that I'll go through quickly so that I honor your time. And but if I need to go back to anything, or if you have any questions at all, we want to save some time at the end for that. So with that, I'll launch in. This is an unprecedented year. I don't think anybody would argue with that statement. This has been an unprecedented year. We have had a global pandemic and are still in it in many, many, many states and ways and cases. You know, we monitor each other's pulse a lot to see if we're doing okay, if we're making it. But it is not the new normal. It is abnormal in this unprecedented year. But on top of a global pandemic, we've had civil unrest. We've had natural disasters, fires burning in California and Colorado, and threatening some of our families and some of their homes and livelihoods. We've had hurricanes, so many in the southeast that they've run out of the alphabet. Now they're on the Greek alphabet, which I actually learned in school. And you know, so it's just an unprecedented year. And on top of all of that comes the economic uncertainties. You know, we crashed in March. We have climbed back, but now it seems that there is that uncertainty again. And forget the typical 4-year political climate and cycle and all of that added to this makes it an unprecedented year. And all of those pluses add up to, in my opinion, and what I've talked to families and staff and what I've felt some in and of myself, is that we've had a loss of what I call moorings, where a ship is tied to the dock. And yes, it might move and it might sway, but it's pretty secure. It's balanced. You can get in it, you can get out of it. It's stable. There's a certainty about it. And when you lose your moorings, you lose some of those things. And when you lose those things, there can be a loss of focus with a subsequent loss of priorities. We began to major in the minors. We began to focus inward. Much of it is very necessary. Much of it is the things that we can control, we begin to focus on, because the whole world is just out of control. Have I described this? Have I described your life and mine? And sometimes you then begin to major on the minors. You begin to focus inward, and there's a tendency to preserve instead of advance, especially in an organization like ours. There is a fine line between being, aggressive and courageous and just being foolhardy. And we don't ever want to cross that line. At the same time, we don't want to, squirrel away and not accomplish our mission. Because one thing we know, and believe it or not, the staff talks about this a lot more than you might think. We understand that FSHD does not stop its devastating effects. And so we understand that we can't either. We must figure out a way. We must move forward. And whether we have, whether we can run and not grow weary, almost like we hit our second wind, or whether it is a trudge uphill and we can hardly make it. We know that we've got to put another step, one step in front of the other. As I mentioned, I do want to take us back just a little bit to talk about our strategic focus, because that's one thing that we've tried to maintain and manage, and that has been our anchor in these times. Not to go into the long story that many of you have heard, but there are two things that have always been there. There are two things that have been discovered that makes a difference in expediting treatments and cures to families. And one of those things is called collective intent. This came from Dr. Frida Lewis Hall, the chief medical officer at Pfizer Pharmaceuticals. And she defined collective intent as the fusion of thought that comes from a shared sense of urgency. And we see it in vaccine and therapy development around COVID right now. We see that global collective intent where pharmaceuticals are starting to work together to accomplish a common goal, where researchers are starting to work together to accomplish a common goal, and clinicians, and some of that. And when there is collective intent, there is advancement and acceleration far beyond what is normal and what is typical. As a matter of fact, what is normal and typical is to get a drug on the market. You go through about 10,000 compounds and about $500 million to $1 billion, and it takes 15 to 20 years for a de novo, for a brand new drug. That can be short-circuited through both collective intent and the patient advocate, and I'll get to that in a moment. Here's how we've structured to maintain our focus around collective intent. In 2018, we launched what we called the Therapeutic Accelerator initiative. And that was really aimed at eliminating obstacles for allowing for the development and treatments and a cure for FSHD globally. In essence, we wanted to reduce the drag on therapies going through a pipeline and ultimately open up the regulatory space and environment. Or I will say it this way, we wanted to redefine the regulatory requirements for getting an appropriate and an approved therapy to our families faster. And so that's embodied in that accelerator, but we knew that we needed a collective intent to do that. And as I said, the patient advocate is the second and only other thing that has ever made a difference. And with that, we've purposed to enlarge and engage and empower an active community, really literally speaking with one voice, 1 million strong around the world. And these two things, collective intent and the patient advocate, has always been shown to shorten the time of drug development from start to finish and getting therapies to the market. So it's kind of how we've thought about it. That's our program priorities. Picture them on twin tracks of a train. You've got to have one. You can't just go on one. We're not a monorail here. And that's how we're going to get there. As such, what we seek to do in building collective intent is to get all the parties around the table that's necessary. So we've engaged with industry, 12 to 15 industry partners we're currently working with and that are currently either interested in our space or really in our space and developing therapies that will ultimately move into a clinical trial. Academia, we have a long history of funding and building and growing good researchers and good research projects, and we're still invested in that and moving forward there. Our regulatory environment, many organizations like ours kind of miss, if you will, this key component, but regulators, the FDA in particular, unless you define what is an acceptable therapy to your families, they will set a bar really high. And the pharmaceuticals industry partners will not go anywhere near it. They say, we can't achieve that in a therapy. That's too high a bar. Plus, it probably misses the target. And so we've engaged with the regulatory and had them at the table. There are also some FSHD funding groups around the world, and we've partnered with them. They've partnered with us. We're moving forward together in a unified fashion. Again, it's that collective intent that we're moving forward and we're not ignoring. We've actually been the catalyst to launch what we've called now the World FSHD Alliance. And that's patient organizations, not funding organizations per se, like I just talked about, but patient organizations like the FSHD Society here in the States, in countries around the world, 14 or 15 of them. That's just the best I can remember. There might be more, there might be a few less, so I want to qualify that. But we've had meetings of their leaders now for the past 2 years. This past year was virtual, of course. And so that's a real powerful show of a collective intent, united force, and the prominence of the patient advocate. That's what we're trying to do there. And of course, our clinical trial research network, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, but it is a key component. And we've gotten all of these around the table, all the stakeholders focused on the same thing. As a matter of fact, it was never so apparent, and this is my little roadmap with some mile markers, some milestones, if you will. As you can see, just backing up one or two boxes, we launched the Therapeutic Accelerator and the Chapter Initiative in order to accomplish the goal of engaging an active community and accelerating research toward treatments and a cure. It's that Therapeutic Accelerator and the Chapter Initiative. The key infrastructure components in us getting that done. In short order, we had 15 chapters. We were planning for an industry FDA meeting, which we had in March of 2019. We had about 60 people there, the best I can remember. There were 8 pharmaceutical research teams. There were 5 FDA members. There were 6 members of the National Institutes of Health. There were some key opinion leaders, researchers, and of course, some funding partners that I'd mentioned before. So we were all at the table, all the stakeholders at the table. And what the topic of the day was what are the obstacles to getting a safe and effective therapy through the clinical trial process and the regulatory process, and get it to our families. And we all came to an agreement, interestingly, on about 4 main buckets, and we've added a 5th one. And I like to describe it as a bridge. Many of you have seen this before, so I'll not belabor the point. But in essence, we knew that we needed a robust natural history that comes from a very large patient registry or registries. We knew we needed more biomarkers that can serve as almost a surrogate to the fact that you've stopped DUX4, just like your therapy said you would. It was interesting. There was a lot of talk around imaging biomarkers. And there's been a lot of talk in the general muscular dystrophy space around MRI biomarkers, so that you can tell the progression of the disease or the stability where you're not progressing in the disease. And of course, clinical outcomes, those hard endpoints that the FDA is looking for, really. I know that in our clinical trial research network, they're doing the reachable workspace, which is you sit in front of a camera and it records your motions, and it can tell over months or a year if you're declining in function, even though you might not be able to tell and the clinician might not be able to tell. So some of these things, these are the 4 things, plus we needed to do a patient-focused drug development meeting, or what we've called the Voice of the Patient Forum. So I'll get to that in a minute. And the FSHD Society is serving as the general contractor. Now, getting back to our road, how are we doing? In 2020, we had targeted those 4 items with 4 targeted workshops. These were to be in person. They were to be industry workshops with some of our researchers participating that happened to have specialties in those 4 areas. And we were all set to go. We were going to host Voice of the Patient Forum. At that juncture, we already had grown to 35 chapters, and we were going to have 25 events. And we had about an $800,000 target for our volunteer fundraising efforts. We were growing. Off of the success of 2019, there could be nothing stopping us. And then COVID hit. Of course, we know that. But we still knew that we needed to do that. We still knew that we had timelines, and we still knew that FSHD waits for no one, and we couldn't either. And so the rest of this is really what has happened, how have we progressed, and what does the next steps look like in general, not specific, but in general. What are the next steps for us? Obviously, we had to pivot. And I'm just going to underline some things on how we've had to pivot in 2020. With our, Therapeutic Accelerator and development, that was one of our 2 priorities. Our Therapeutic Accelerator initiative centered around these things. And as I've already said, the industry collaborative workshop, the industry collaborative on drug development in FSHD was actually the long title we put on it. It was very successful. We've then had a paper published, and it is moving ahead. And many of our researchers are actually using that paper, and some of our pharmaceuticals are using that paper in order to overcome and help us overcome those obstacles. Some we found out are working on biomarkers, some are working on genetic testing, as I'll talk about in a little bit, and some of those kinds of things. So in 2020 through 2023, we knew that we had to both continue to get all the stakeholders at the table to agree upon these key priorities and what projects needed to be done in order to eliminate the obstacles that were there. As far as expanding and strengthening the clinical trial research network, check mark. We've added 4 new sites this year. I'll talk a little bit more about that perhaps I'll talk about it right now, and we'll just move through that slide when it comes. But this is probably the key component that has instigated or prompted pharmaceuticals to get in our space. Aside from discovering the cause of FSHD, I would venture to say, arguably, that the Clinical Trial Research Network, when we launched it with 4 sites in 2016, which has gotten follow-on funding from the NIH, from the Muscular Dystrophy Association, from Friends of FSH Research, from pharmaceuticals such as Fulcrum, and now most recently Dyne Therapeutics are putting in dollars. It is the base of the Fulcrum Clinical Trial Network. They've gone outside that somewhat, but they use that as a base, as other pharmaceuticals will when clinical trials begin to start. This has been the most revolutionary thing that has expedited therapy development and accomplishing or clicking off some of those obstacles, if you will, that have been in our way. It is truly a core facility globally, and it's now up to 12 sites. We've just added 4 more with our dollars, our commitment of almost $1 million, $900,000 over the next 3 years. We're in year 1.5 of that, and we've launched 4 new sites, and that helps do a follow-on study to the RESOLVE study called MOVE. And so you'll be hearing about that coming up in a little bit. The patient-focused drug development meeting, or what we term the Voice of the Patient Forum, we were able to do that virtually this year. Genetic testing. We really wanted a better, faster, cheaper genetic test, and we've now, and our Chief Science Officer, Dr. Arjman, Jamshi Arjman, did a lot of research, a lot of talking to companies with some, I don't know if it's called next generation technology, but it's certainly next generation for us. It's the next level of technology. And a company, PerkinElmer, has picked up some of that technology and now has commercialized it, dropping the cost from maybe $3,000 down to $699, I think. And we're building a system around it, but we're partnering with them. They're a fine partner for us, and they've really supported financially through sponsorship some of our, well, all of our chapter program too. And so it's really, it's good for us. Circulating biomarkers, registries, and imaging biomarkers, we've worked on them, but we still have more work to do. I'll go through these really quick. Of course, the 4 sites we've added is Stanford to the Clinical Trial Research Network, Colorado, University of Texas Southwest, which is based in Dallas, Texas, and the University of Florida in Gainesville. And as I mentioned, the MOVE FSHD protocol is getting ready to be added to these sites as well as the other sites. And we're up to 19 now globally. While the global sites are affiliate sites, they're working on becoming an official part of the network. So this Clinical Trial Research Network is and will be even more a global network, a very powerful global network that will move things along. The Voice of the Patient Forum, I can't overstate its importance. And you responded wonderfully. As a matter of fact, both James Valentine, who's done 25 of the 33 or so that had been done to that date since 2012, and the platform, the technology platform and company that we were using to broadcast and to do all of that, they said, listen, typically at the end of the day, the phone calls start tapering off. We have to kind of encourage the patients or urge some of the families to call in and to call in. They said, your people, they called, they jammed our switchboards, they stayed on the phone for an hour for a chance to have their voice heard. Good on you. I say, good on you. It mattered, and it will matter going forward. It really does. We're about ready to release the Voice of the Patient report, which will go to the FDA, and it will be used by pharmaceuticals. You'll be able to look at it, download it if you want to. Although while it's a 37, I call it a 37-page summary. There's actually 2 pages that are a summary of the summary. There's 37 pages that outline what we've said. And then there's, I think, 600 pages of appendices, something like that. And the reason being, we asked the FDA, who was helping us in developing this and formulating this and finalizing the project, said, do we need to put in all of the things and all of the testimonies and all of the words that our families have said? And they said, yes, please do. Some of the people at the FDA like to read the family's own words. So over 600 people participated in pre-meeting surveys. There was over 400 participants the day of the day of. It was incredible. And if you haven't heard or haven't read in some letters, and I think this is phenomenal and speaks so well of you, our community, it is now considered the gold standard by both the FDA and James Valentine and his group to use as an example of actually a really great patient-focused drug development meeting. So that's an added bonus and benefit that's complementary to you. But the main purpose and the main reason is to, James Valentine, during one of the breaks that we had as we rehearsed this the day before, he said, you need to understand, Mark, we're not asking the FDA to lower their standard. If they have no input from families, then they set the bar way over here. And what this does is it gives a more accurate, it redefines what is appropriate, what is an appropriate therapy for your families, not Duchenne's families, not myotonic families, not the muscular dystrophy families, but where they might have set the definition of an effective therapy over here, your families have now redefined it for them over here. And the FDA is glad of that, because now they have a good definition because of you. Again, I could go on and on, continuing to praise our community, but this really, really has moved the needle and was significant. And of course, genetic testing, I talked about that. We are going to be working more on this. There are some others that are coming out. There's other projects that are coming out that might prove to be even faster, better, and cheaper. But this is a really, really great thing. And we check that off our list, and we continue to monitor and to move forward and to really, like I said, bring all the stakeholders at the table around this point. Circulating biomarkers. We hosted a virtual workshop. We had about 40 individuals, I think about 12 pharmaceutical companies attending, along with researchers that are in this space. And I've explained this to many of you, the importance of a blood biomarker or a circulating biomarker. And I've explained it in ways that, if you have a cardiac event and you go to the hospital, the emergency room, they take your blood, and apparently there has been validated that there's an enzyme that's in your blood that's only there if you've had a heart event. Much the same way, there have been small preliminary studies And as Dr. Arjman has read the literature that's out there and talked with various researchers and scientists that's working in this field, we believe that we've identified 6 great candidates. And those are at the bottom of the screen in red, represented by numbers in alphabet. That doesn't mean anything to me. But what we're going to be doing is we're going to, and we've already set up we've already got some pricing from Immunologics, which is a commercial company that both validates biomarkers like this and can take them through the regulatory process to get them to get them standardized and that kind of thing. And so we're not slowing up here. This could be a real key component to unlock and eliminate a huge obstacle to clinical trial and clinical trial development right now. And so we're real excited about this. This does not come inexpensive. This doesn't come cheap. There is, what we've done is we've set up milestone gates. So we take some of these biomarkers to a certain point, and if they continue to prove out, we go to the next point and then the next. But if they don't, we drop them. So we don't waste time and we don't waste money. We don't waste resources on that, and we'll go to the next one. So we've milestone gated this so that we can be good stewards of the resources that have been entrusted to us. But we believe that in the next couple of years, 2-3 years, that we will be able to identify and validate one of these. We believe that. Integration of registries. We've worked and talked with most of the global registries around the world. I won't go too deep into this, but you know, we've funded an artificial intelligence, a machine learning project with the U.S. registry. It's not from IBM's Watson, but picture that kind of machine learning, artificial intelligence component. We're looking at doing that with the UK and the French registry also. And just recently, there is a nonprofit that was created and funded by the FDA to standardize data and then have that data analyzed in various disease sets. And they've reached out to us. It's called Critical Paths Institute, or CPATH for short. And actually, they would take all of the global registries and data and all of the clinical trial data around the world and standardize it, and we wouldn't have to pay for it. Now, we might have to pay to get that data uploaded, say from the Italian registry or the US registry or whatever, but it would be a fraction of the cost that it would be to do it ourselves. And they're good at it. They've done it before. I've worked with them before in another organization. And so we're excited about following through with that process in 2021 and beyond to accomplish this goal and to tick this off and to eliminate this as an obstacle to further development. And again, imaging biomarkers, you know, as we progress, Doris Long has done an amazing study. Some of you have been in that. And we're stepping in any way we can to help her with the analysis so that we can move forward and farm any of that from there. I'm going to go through again very quickly now our second priority: enlarge, engage, and empower FSHD communities. We knew that we had to do something. The staff was amazing at their transition, at their ability to pivot. And yet make sure to ensure that while this is a difficult time, we didn't want anybody going through this time alone. We don't want anybody traveling the journey alone. And so sequester camp was set up, and the radio, we had a whole host of things happening every week. Many of you participated in that. and the results were outstanding. I have quoted to some of you larger numbers. Those were from another event, actually our walk in the 5,000 range, etc. But these are real numbers. Our typical webinars would have maybe 75 to 125 at them until now. And we begin to have, as you can see on March 26, we had 1,900, 1,200, 1,300, 1,700, 1,700, 2,100 on June the 11th. Just an amazing reach. Our Connect classroom, we wanted to have a Connect conference. We had to turn it into virtual. It had an amazing participation. And now we are committed, both with our International Research Congress and with our Patient Connect conference, to always have a live stream component, even when we can get back together and have a conference face to face. And so it's amazing, amazing. We have continued on. Look at the chapter. 2 years ago, this map was empty. This map was empty 2 years ago. And these are the absolutely incredible, stalwart, courageous heroes that have moved forward in spite of 2020, I'll say. They've taken the mantle of leaderships, all of them leaders in and of themselves, and they have extended our reach and impacted our world more than this guy can say or illustrate. Amazing. They are amazing. And right now my heart is applauding. So that's just amazing. One thing they did is they said, well, we've never done a virtual walk and roll. There is no playbook for this. Not many people, if any people, had ever done a virtual walk and roll. So let's go, let's start. And they all rallied. Every chapter came to the table, and every chapter said, we're going to do it. If you'll help us, we'll do it. And our amazing staff, along with our wonderful chapter directors, walk leaders, they spectacular. Over $529,000 was raised. I put two big red circles. Nearly 3,600 people were part of the day participating, sometimes with as little as $5 or as much as $10,000 in a donation. And we reached over 5,300 people with a live stream participated on that day. Amazing, amazing results. And what about 2021 in our outreach and engagement? How do we take a group that we've caught their eye, and now how can we capture their hearts? And there's just some things that we're looking to do, expand and deepen our international engagement. We're going to launch 2021 Family Day conferences with our chapter program. When we can all connect again in person, we're going to launch with a reconnect party throughout the nation. And so we've got some great things planned. We know that we have to heighten our engagement through clinical partnerships. We have to grow our community. We've launched FSHD University, which is amazing. It's a monthly webinar about things that are important to you. Of course, our radio show, our family days, CTRN, all of those things mount up and add up. Some other activities we're working on is to do a health economic report. I'll not take our precious time to explain that, except to say that this is very much needed in helping the insurance industry embrace and be willing to pay for any therapies that come on the market. There's all kinds of other things and reasons, and that this will be a catalyst to, but we're working with Optum and Sinos Health on an analysis, and it's going to be great. Updating our standard of care and providing clinical medical education courses on FSHD, preferably, and we're working with the MDA to access clinicians, not just in the neuromuscular space, but if we can in the primary physician space, so that our families can get diagnosed and treated appropriately. So you don't have to go through 5 or 6 or 7 years of misdiagnosis anymore. And so that's kind of the key component there. Again, I have to say, all of this has been made possible, and we can only plan because of you. Because of you. In 18, we launched this, and it was a crazy endeavor. We knew we had to. We knew we couldn't say no to it, but we didn't know where the resources were going to come from. But you responded. You responded through your financial support, through your active engagement, through signups. Many of you have volunteered then to be a chapter director since then. Special events, webinars. This is the fuel. I can't overstate this. This is the fuel that allows us to go further, faster. And I just wanted to pause right now and just say, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You are making a difference. You really, really are. It's amazing. And we keep our priorities firmly fixed in our minds. We have to reach a goal of therapies to our families by 2025. And you will be a part of the celebration because you, in large part, have produced it, have made it happen. And while we have remained focused and moved forward toward our goal, 2020 has impacted the society. Let me just run through numbers really briefly. The gray bar is what we did last year. The aqua bar, blue bar, green bar, whatever you want to call it, is where we had set the bar for us this year without COVID. We had prepared an aggressive revenue budget and an aggressive program spending budget where we invest a lot of money in a lot of these projects going forward. In March of 2020, when it became apparent that this lockdown was happening and we didn't know what was going to happen economically, Lisa Stimmer, our chief financial officer, and myself, Lisa Schimmel, we kind of did this, and we thought, I think our people are going to respond. I think they're going to be there, but we can't ignore the potential impact. And so let's not cut any of the accelerated programs we're doing, but where else can we reduce budgets? Because we anticipate and expect about an $800,000, $850,000 shortfall in the green line total revenue budget of about 2.8, 2.9, or 3.8, 3.9. What that really looks like is, our revenue budget was 3.9, give or take a few dollars. We revised it in March to 3.05, or about $850,000 less. We are on target for that, by the way, because of your generosity, because of you're not letting things slow you down or stall or stop you either. And nicely, budgeted expenditure savings, excluding research. Some of the research dollars we wanted to spend couldn't be because the labs were closed. We've moved forward on the obstacle initiatives, if you will, but some of the other research projects have just been stalled, not by our doing necessarily. But $412,000 we've saved from our budget, which leaves about a $438,000 deficit that we're expecting. It's probably going to be a little less than that, more in the 350 range. We have dollars in the bank. We had a stellar year last year. We actually raised money for this year, so we forward fund a lot of things we do. But where it's critical is not necessarily this year, but how we finish the end of this year will determine how aggressive we can be in 2021. Which of those projects have to go slower, or which of those projects are going to have to take a back seat, if you will, or we figure out another way to do it, or we bump it a few months just to see. We're already in the process of creating budgets, and we're already trying to reduce in all other areas so that we can fund forward these major initiatives that are going to get us there and get us there further faster. I had this at one point in time in another CEO webinar, and it fits here with a little bit of this. And really, why should we be taking the lead in all of this work? Some would say we're small. Why doesn't this group do it, or that group do it, or that group do it, or that group do it? Let me reiterate, we are the only organization worldwide who can catalyze all the stakeholders, literally bring them together like I talked about, that can serve as an honest broker and general contractor to get the critical work done and leave the lesser work alone till later. In other words, establishing, setting priorities and moving through those priorities until we get to the goal. We are the only organization that has the largest patient contact registry, almost 3,900 self-identified patients in our contact registry. But not only are we the only organization that can do all of that, I believe the FSHD Society, we together, the community collectively, we have a moral obligations to our families we serve to do this. I look at some of our families, I've grabbed some of their arms when it was okay to touch, or held some of their hands, and I've said, we've got to be able to do this. We have to do this. Failure cannot be an option for us. It can't be. And so we move forward, and we move forward confidently because of your continued commitment and your continued support. I think that we should be taking the lead to this work because the FSHD Society is a good steward, and always has been a good steward of the resources entrusted to us, and is a good investment. And again, anybody can do the ordinary, but I think we're being challenged to do the extraordinary. Literally, the best of us and the best from us, especially in these unprecedented times. That's our challenge, and that's our hope. And we're going to get there together. A small body of determined spirits, fired by an unquenchable faith in their mission, can alter the course of history. We are truly stronger together. We really are. Thank you for listening. June, I hand it over to you. And are there any questions?
Yes, so please, everybody, if you have questions about anything, just put them in the Q&A. We have a couple comments or a question from Ray. He says, a great initiative regarding the World FSHD Alliance. I applaud all those who made this happen. Do you want to comment a bit on the importance of the international?
Yes. And June, I applaud you. You are the representative for us, leading that group and leading forward and doing a fine job at it. You need to understand that one of the key critical things in a rare disease for a pharmaceutical is, will there be enough patient support to launch a clinical trial, especially as we get to a phase 3 trial, and it might be 100 or 150 or 200 people. And that's hard to find with a defined protocol. So you might need a bucket this big. Well, what we can do with our pharmaceuticals is say, we have active patient communities in X number of countries around the world where our clinical trials network sites are, as well as other sites you might be wanting to go to, India, China, et cetera, et cetera. And it is incredibly attractive to pharmaceuticals that those things are there. There's also a sharing and a combined effort and a strength that we get when we come together working toward a common goal and a common purpose. Again, the patient advocate speaking with one voice, 1 million strong, is kind of the imagery, if you will. So.
Great, thank you. Also from Ray, he's wanting to know, when will the Voice of the Patient report summary be available? I think it's in my hands, so I probably
I was going to say June. When will it be available?
I am literally going through galley proof. There are a few hundred like little edits and so on, but very close. I hope within by the end of next week, let's say. And we have a question from Mimi. Where do things stand with stem cell research?
You know, and Jen, feel free to comment after I do. I do know that we are funding one researcher at University of Minnesota in stem cell research, literally regenerating muscle. And Jen, you might want to highlight that research project and others a little better to give our crowd, you know, a better flavor of that.
Yeah, so there's different flavors of stem cell research. There has been work in the past that the society has funded and others have funded where researchers have figured out how to reprogram a cell like a blood cell or a skin cell and turn it into what's called a pluripotent cell. So it's like a stem cell, and it can then be engineered to grow into a muscle type cell. And if you take these from patients, then you have kind of an FSHD in a dish, like an FSHD muscle in a dish, which the first thing that's very valuable for is you can test drugs against this to see if it stops the effects of DUX4. You can also study what happens to those cells to understand the disease mechanism better. But the other hope is that you can one day use cells like this and basically treat them in the test tube so that your own cells that have the FSHD genetic mechanism will be kind of cured in the dish and then transplanted back into you. And because they're your own cells, you know, your immune system won't reject them, and that you could regenerate a healthy muscle. That's one kind of scenario. And Dr. Perlingero is kind of investigating sort of early stages of that kind of work. She's done a lot of this work in Duchenne, and we kind of, you know, harangued her a bit to say, how about FSHD? It helps that her husband is Michael Kaiba, who's one of the top FSHD researchers, but she was working on Duchenne, and we were saying like, hey, what about FSHD? So she's started a project with that. It's, you know, it's that kind of regenerative therapy is challenging, but we see long-term that it could have tremendous potential. Right. So we're certainly investing in that.
And June, I do know, and I've used Dr. Rita, I can't hardly say her last name. I've used her as an example when I've talked to some families just on Zoom. And really, what we're doing is, while we're focused on a DUX4, therapy, if you will, something that eliminates or reduces it, we've not lost track that, you know, we would like to have a regenerative, a muscle regenerative or a muscle growth, muscle building kind of component to our therapy also, almost. And so we're still moving forward in that regard too. While you were talking, I looked and Sue asked, and I'm just delighted to share this, what's coming up next in the pipeline from a therapy development standpoint. And while we can't always unveil things that are happening, what we do here is that in 2021, there is every intention that 2 or maybe 3 new clinical trials, therapeutic interventional trials, will be launched. Small studies, little small studies, but that's how you start. You start with a small study, and then you go to a larger phase 2, and then a phase 3, et cetera. And so we're excited about that because back on my road, if you read all the way to the top of it, we thought that by 2023, we would be having 5+ clinical trials that either had happened or were happening in our space by then. Well, if 2 or 3 launch, and we've already had 1 or 2, we might have to up that goal, but that's exciting.
very much so. I wanted to throw in also that for those of you who have volunteered for the National Registry or the Resolve study, these are foundational. The clinical trials cannot happen without them. And those studies are still ongoing, and an extension of that, the MOVE study, is also starting to recruit volunteers. So that is something very direct that any one of you, if you have FSHD, can help move the needle by participating in those studies.
Yes. As a matter of fact, our Hall of Heroes are replete with those who volunteered for the observational studies, because that's got us to here this day. Seriously.
So if there are any more questions, I don't see any at the moment. So, and we are almost at the end of our hour. So this is time to wrap up. And by the way, Rita Perlinguero's talk is on our YouTube channel. So if you want to find out about the stem cell research, it's right there.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you all for tuning in. You mean the world to me, really. And I carry you in my heart, especially during these, the overused word, unprecedented times. So thanks for joining us.